Great. Chris has given a great overview, and certainly today, you know, for many of you, this is going to be kind of just like, you know, the fire hose going, oh my gosh, there was a lot of information there. And certainly both Chris and I are absolutely available to talk to, you know, any club in your district. And I've already been looking at some of the questions. You know, a couple people have asked, could a club sign a resolution and just go forward? And certainly that is possible. I guess Chris and I have been thinking it's just more efficient for us to track and keep kind of count if we work through the district level, and especially district environmental committees if you have one. And I know there's been one form now in 6220, and so that environmental committee can help organize and figure out which clubs are doing what under the resolution. But that's just a thought. I mean, if you really think that your district is going to be a long way off from signing a resolution, absolutely, clubs can go out on their own and start this. So I'm going to follow up with, now that you've heard a talk on Operation Pollination, a lot of clubs then go, well, geez, how would we actually do a project? And again, I'm going to pour out a lot of information. This is going to be recorded. You can go back and review it, but I'm also just really happy to continue a conversation with your clubs. And my computer doesn't seem to want to advance. Oop, oop. Of course, now it's advancing too much. Okay, so there are 4 basic steps. I'm going to review them really quickly, and then I'll give you some more detail on them. And these are pretty common sense. Notice the picture there. That is actually a picture from 6250 from the amazing Rotary Garden in Janesville. And that's a whole story in of itself of how that project came to be. So the first place, you know, what Chris and I ultimately want, we don't want just people signing resolutions and finding partners. You know, we really want to ultimately see change on the ground in that we want to see more habitat and either, you know, plants planted or plants encouraged or plants enhanced. So your very first job would be thinking about a location, either an existing one or a new one, and then how you would prep that site to get ready for planting. The second is where do you get your plants? And there's a whole array of ideas of, you know, it's probably best not to just go to your big box store and buy them. There's a lot of cheaper, better local sources than a big national, you know, kind of getting a plant that you don't know where it came from. Again, as Chris emphasized in the Operation Pollination, you know, this is a natural for Rotary. It's all about working with partners. That's what we do already. So this is not a hard thing for a club to do. Is that I bet within any club right now, you've got ideas for partners and who can help you. But that's really important. This is not meant for Rotary just to go at it themselves without working with partners. And then probably most important, and this is becoming an increasing emphasis within Rotary, the worst thing that we want is to have a nice Rotary sign about a pollinator project, and then it ends up looking like that picture within a year, that it's just a weedy mess and people go, God, whatever happened? You know, why did Rotary abandon this? So, you know, thinking about the future and what is the long-term care for whatever you're working on. So the where is probably one of the most fun things a club can do. And this is a great project, and especially a great social distancing project for clubs that may still may not be meeting in person or may want to do more outside things this summer. And you can even do this as a scavenger hunt where you break into small teams and you walk around your downtown and you brainstorm ideas of where you could possibly put in a pollinator project. Now, sure, there are actually some clubs that are thinking big. They're like thinking an acre or 2 acres. That's a big project. But, you know, Chris and I are thinking at any scale, and even, you know, the tiny little boulevard in front of your library, that little weedy corner next to the gas station, a cemetery, you know, churches are really ripe ideas because they often have these huge grassy yards that really don't get any use except for some poor guy or gal that has to mow them all the time. And again, I bet through your Rotary network, you might know someone that goes to that church, and you could say, hey, have you ever thought about doing, you know, something more with that big lawn in front of the church? Obviously, welcome signs to communities are big, obvious projects and potential sites as well. So if you have a welcome to whatever town, those are definitely potential projects. Now, certainly, we also don't want to forget, and Chris mentioned this already, that a club may decide that they're not going to do a public site, but they may want to challenge, you know, how many sites can they get individual members to do in the coming spring or summer. So, you know, and this is certainly an over the top. This is someone that took their whole front yard and put it into pollinators. There's no grass in that picture at all. But you can certainly have more modest ideas of gardens. And I love the one on the right where the neighbor is just this dry desert lawn in the backyard. And here's someone that put in this really nice, lush looking pollinator garden. So certainly one way to go would be to challenge individual members in your club to see if they are interested themselves in putting in, and literally we call them a patch for pollinators, and they can be tiny, tiny patches. Every patch makes a difference. There are amazing resources online for learning about pollinators and what to do. And certainly one of the best partner organizations is the Xerxes Society. And they have a whole checklist of actions that you can look at a checklist. There's actually, you can take photos and you can do some things with your phone that are fun. There's scoring, you can score a site. So again, you may not want to get that involved, but all these resources exist. And again, if you have, maybe you've done that scavenger hunt type of thing, and you have 4 different sites around your town that you're considering, you may want to look at some of these documents to say, what would be the best, you know, how do each of these rank, and which would be the best in terms of location, sun, habitat, all of those things. So sources of plants, what kind of plants do I need to get? Again, some amazing resources online. The Pollinator Partnership website, you can actually type in your zip code and get a nice color sheet of the plants, the pollinator plants appropriate for your growing zone and in your region of the country. The Xerxes Society, once again, they also have lists of pollinator-friendly plants. And I will say throughout the spring, if you start to perk up your ears, and again, this is where I'm happy to help you network to the right people, there are more and more native plant sales going on in many counties throughout the Midwest. There's just, I know this spring in my area, many county extensions and master gardener groups had native plant sales that included many partners or many pollinators, sorry. So just a heads up for your source of plants, it does sound ironic, but actually there are some pollinator plants, especially from big box stores, that have been treated with a chemical, the neonics, that are actually harmful to caterpillars and then butterflies and moths. So you just want to be careful when you're buying something. And again, it's not the cheapest, best way to go is just go to the big box store and buy all your plants. Again, there's better, cleaner, safer, and more locally sourced ways to do that. So then it really comes down to actually doing the project and thinking about site prep. And this is where I'm excited to maybe inspire a lot of your clubs for your fall, your October challenge and your environmental challenge it's a great time to smother a bunch of lawn in the fall and then come back in the spring and you're going to have a site ready to plant. So if you can get your site identified by the fall, it's a really fun activity. You can see this site, they put down cardboard, plywood. And again, the whole idea is to kill that grass, get rid of that grass. You don't want to spray it. You really, the easiest way is to try to smother it. And then this site in particular, they decided to do some fairly challenging and interesting, because it was on a slope. This shows a really mixed media of both stones and then concrete stones and then raised beds that they chose to do in this little pollinator garden. Here again is a club setting up to do a rotary. So the actual circle, the rotary, and it actually plays very well as a cool pollinator garden with spokes coming out and pathways. And again, this was kind of a cool project where all the Rotarians, brought cardboard to this work day. They put it all down. And again, in a number of weeks, and again, in the fall, this is great. If you can put this down, weigh it down, make it sleep for the winter, come back in the spring, and you're going to have some nice soil to dig around in. You can do, and I do know a Rotary Club that they were determined to try to keep their sod, and it's like, oh, this is hard work, but you can rent these turf, almost like a turf mowing up type of thing, where you can actually save the grass, roll it up, and then someone can take it home or you can use it someplace else. You definitely need some pretty strong oomph behind that cutter, but you can do site prep that way as well. I also don't want to overlook areas like a rain garden. And if you're not familiar with rain gardens are meant to be kind of water impoundments that take water out of or getting the drainage from, say, a impervious surface like this parking lot. And they can be amazing pollinator gardens. And again, they may be something that maybe is not even grass right now, but you could make into a wet pollinator garden and an area for water storage. So again, you can definitely Google rain gardens and even rain garden and then your state and find a lot of examples. So I am a master gardener, and I definitely want to tout, please, if you're thinking of a project with pollinators, contact your local master gardener program. Master gardeners are required to do so many hours a year of service in their community, and they are a supernatural partner for designing a garden, for helping you to figure out what plants are appropriate, to actually figuring out, okay, that one should go in the back and you should bring this one forward so that the height will work, color coordination if you want that. But they are just a great group. And again, almost every county or every 2 counties would have a master gardener program. And then there should be a local extension person that could help you network. Oh, you need some organic soil. Oh, you need mulch. Oh, you want to have a big work day where you need help planting. The master gardener and your state extension can help with all of that. So I definitely want to give a big shout out to the master gardener program. And again, the master gardeners that are just coming in every year, and they're called interns the first year that they're becoming master gardeners, they're required to do 40 hours of community service. So those new master gardeners in particular are ones that you can grab for a project. And I don't want to have you forget some maybe unusual places that you may not think of to source plants, and not so much partners to work in your pollinator garden, but we had an example in Michigan where we obtained all our plants from greenhouses at a prison. And the prison services had a whole horticultural training program for the inmates, and they grew a whole bunch of plants and then usually donated them, or in some cases sold them at cost to groups that wanted plants. Now, this is certainly not a universal practice, but again, I want, I'm showing this slide to get you to think creatively of like, oh, I wonder if we could get plants from X. So it's really just an example. And then, again, this is probably the most important, thing to think about, because again, everyone's a happy gardener in May and June before it gets hot, before things get weedy. And just that long term, are your partners committed to helping maintain the garden? Are Rotarians going to go weed and water? Are the school kids going to weed and water? A lot of school gardens, what happens is there's super enthusiasm until school's out, and then everyone like vanishes, and you're like, whoa, what happened to all those volunteers? So it's really important from the get-go of your project to make a plan of how you're going to do those work days. And again, during the school year, your Interact kids, high school kids, elementary kids, all kinds of volunteers may be available, but it's that hard summertime where it might be dry, it might be hot, it might be weedy, and you just got to figure out how you're going to keep it looking good. Something that I faced very much this summer and has probably become my #1 mantra for pollinator gardens is your water source. And planting a great gigantic pollinator garden may seem really super when you do it again and it's nice and wet in May. And I ended up volunteering on a huge entrance sign pollinator project that has no way to water it. So our summer has been horrible here in Iowa. It's been very hot and very dry. And that's the way that I have to water with that truck. And it's a real pain in the butt. I have to go and get the truck. I have to fill it with water. I have to back it over this kind of sketchy hill. I have to take a hose and I have to spend an hour and a half hand watering all the plants. And that's not the way I really wanted to do this. And it would have been so much easier if we thought about irrigation, or if just there was a spigot, the city water had a spigot there that we could hook a hose to, but none of those are available. So again, even if you're looking at the library, if you're looking at some place, think about, okay, are we gonna try to make all the Rotarians lug water here in jugs and jars to water? Or, hey, do they have a spigot around the side of the building? And again, that's what's cool about most churches. Most churches and, a lot of buildings, there is some water spigot somewhere that you could probably hook a hose to. But especially this summer, I think it really emphasized that don't undercount planning for how you're going to water. And especially establishing successfully a bed, you really need to think about water. The good news is that I'm not particularly mentioning, oh, you got to build a big deer fence, because luckily, almost all our native pollinators are naturally deer resistant. If I was telling you how to do a community garden, like with vegetables, I'd say, first you have to build a really big fence. But with a pollinator garden, we have not had that many issues at all with deer. So lastly, there are some other fun things that a Rotary Club can fundraise for or add to a pollinator garden, including kind of these cool like butterfly chairs. This is the Ryman Gardens at Iowa State University in Ames. And then these really cool, this was a local county park where they created just these wood templates and then had some talented high schoolers paint these, and you can do selfies in front of them at the county park. But wow, wouldn't this be a cool Rotary pollinator garden idea where you could paint different native butterflies on this template? And then again, you do selfies in front of it, which are so popular now, where you stand in front of it and it looks like you have wings. So I do want to emphasize this great project that happened this spring. This is the Rotary Club of Lake in the Hills in Illinois, and it's in District 6440. And they just clicked every single box on how they did this project. They located it at a print shop, and there was a Rotary network knowledge of that print shop, and knew they had some land. And the print shop said, sure, we'll donate a little chunk of our land. They then went to a local group, the Land Conservancy of that county, and the Land Conservancy helped them find and get native plants that were local pollinators. And then they did end up going to the big box store, but they went to the big box store because a lot of these big box stores have community grants available, and they got a whole bunch of tools at the big box store donated. So it's just like, wow, this club, boom, boom, boom. They did everything right. They found somebody's property. They got plants sourced locally with a great partner, and they got a bunch of free tools from a clever knowledge of a community grant. So this is the type of example we really want to see. I will give you a couple ideas. This is already a project that now is in its second year. This is the Spearfish Rotary Club in North Dakota. No, wait a minute, South Dakota. And they partnered with their Parks and Rec and the university, and they actually went to another RAG. You heard Chris and I that this Operation Pollination is a project under SRAG, which is the Environmental Rotary Action Group. They actually went to the Peace Rotary Action Group and got one of these peace poles that you see in the middle there and made it a Rotary pollinator peace garden, and actually had a dedication, and now it's a prominent thing in their town, which is a great idea. The other thing I wanted to remind Rotarians, either, if you've got a shirt while you're working, that's great. This was a sign that was put up while a pollinator garden was being created in Washington state, and they were using disadvantaged kids and having disadvantaged kids help, and it was for a home there for disadvantaged kids. But I love this sign, which is just such, it doesn't cost that much to have a sign like this made. And while you're having your work day, or if you have a weed and feed every month, where you're meeting a Saturday morning with coffee and donuts and you're weeding, you just plunk, oh, Joe, remember to bring that sign, plunk that sign in the ground, and people walking by go, oh, look, Rotarians. So it's just a great promo, cheap way to promote ourselves. Again, here are the links. And again, because this will be recorded, I know you can re-look at this and get this. But again, just a couple of major names that you need to remember. The Pollinator Partnership is a great website, deep, lots of stuff you can look at. The Xerxes Society, the National Wildlife Federation, and then the Monarch Joint Venture. They have a ton of stuff as well. They have habitat guides. They have appropriate milkweed guides for monarchs. They just have a ton of information. So here is a happy Rotarian that was putting in a garden earlier. And yeah, I think I will open it up for both questions for Chris and myself. And this is how you can get a hold of me. And certainly I do want to restate what Chris had already mentioned. We do have a Facebook page that is called Paths to Pollinators Rotary Network. And the whole purpose of that Facebook page is both to promote ideas from partners like Monarch Joint Venture or Xerxes, but really also to start featuring projects that Rotary clubs are doing. Like, hey, look, this club this weekend, here's the project that went in, or wow, here's now an example of, a 2-year-old monarch pollinator garden. So, like that site, it's usually posted to, I usually add content at least probably twice a week. But again, as people start to do projects, this is where Chris and I would love to get real examples, like, oh, the Janesville Rotary Club did this cool project, or the Escanaba Club did this neat project, and just even the creative places that you ended up deciding to put a project, and the unique and individual partners that you ended up working with. So I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tina. Oh my goodness, Chris and Tina, you put together an excellent presentation, and it's so easily split into two that will be really meaningful for our clubs and so useful well into the future. I'm going to start with a question, and there were no questions in chat, but there was a little bit of conversation, and idea sharing is really nice. Although we were not distracted from your presentation. So Tina, my question is, can you explain why every patch makes a difference?
Sure, and there's a great, if some of you have probably heard of this guy, Doug Talamay, and during the pandemic, he must have given, I think he gave like 100,000 talks. But his real spiel is, let's try to make a homegrown national park in the United States. And his whole push is every single little patch makes a difference. And even if you have your neighborhood and you create one little place for milkweed, you will start to get native pollinators coming to that. And he actually did some experiments in New York City on the High Line, which is a bike path in very, very urban New York City, and planted milkweed in the High Line little, this teeny little green strip on this pedestrian path, and found within about 3 weeks, monarchs were coming to that. And, the amazing thing is, like, he was trying to figure out where the next, habitat patch was, because this was literally truly an oasis. But what they're finding in a lot of research is that every single small patch, added up makes a difference. Now, certainly the greatest effect is if you do something in your yard and your next door neighbor does something and the next door neighbor does something, and then the gas station in town and the school in town, the more little patches you can get, the biggest difference you can make. But certainly every single one, I mean, if you think of all our lawns and all our green, and just taking a 100% of a town and starting to put that into native plants, the native bees, the butterflies will find that. So it's really, there's no, he has a picture in a presentation he does of literally, I swear, it's like a 1x2 square in somebody's yard, where they just took this tiny piece of their front yard and carved it out, and pollinators started coming to it.
Thank you. We do have one other question. How long after planting do we typically see results?
Well, there's a saying in gardening, and it's definitely true. I certainly have experienced this very much, that first plants sleep, then they creep, then they leap. And I would say, depending on your soils and your site and how often you water, definitely the first year, you're not going to see a huge explosion in your garden, especially, those of us that are planting more prairie pollinators, like a number of the, some of the native grasses, coneflowers, milkweed to some extent, they spend the first year really developing a massive root length and connection, and they're not spending a lot of time putting a lot of stuff out. So, the month after you plant, are you going to see a brilliant flower display that first year? Probably not. They're still really, developing that root. Now, the second year, that's when you're going to see that kind of that creep, and that creep can be pretty dramatic. And then third year going forward, that's where then you might say, whoa, okay, we need to start thinking about dividing this. This is going to take over. So it does, with perennials, they're not an instantaneous, it's not going to be dramatic, but you can still have a really nice looking garden your first year. It's just not going to be as full and dramatic as it will be in year 2 and 3.
Thank you. As a gardener myself, it's very tempting to overplant too. So really important to have a master gardener on your team, or somebody with practical experience that will help you understand what are weeds and what are flowers. That can be difficult to see too. So anybody else want to just come off mute and shout out a question?
I have a quick question, a comment, is that there's an app you can get that can identify weeds versus, good things that you want there. And that would be a neat project for anyone to get used to. And I've started to use that in my gardens, and I haven't gotten very far because I overplanted, to tell you the truth. I just did. should have talked to a master gardener. So these are good tips. Everyone, both of you just did a fabulous job of introducing us to this adventure that we are taking on. And if we really do what you've talked about, we can make a difference. We can help us save our pollinators and how critical they are. So I can't thank you two enough for inspiring us, and we will take what you've said and we will work on that. It'll be fabulous, just fabulous.
Thank you for the kind words, and just know we're here for you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to stop recording, and then I'm in no hurry. I'm hosting this meeting, so we can hang out, or you should feel free to leave. And all the best to all of our Rotarians and Rotary Clubs who are thinking about making a start or continuing something. Enjoy partnership, work well within the resources that you have so you feel very successful and can grow just like our plants do. Sleep, creep, and leap in your service. Thank you.
Thank you.